The secrets of the small shafts of the Great Pyramid. 6 underbar more items in the shafts. Part 5. Just like in the south shaft, only the last part of the shaft before the blocking stone is very clean. Before that, as can be seen in the pictures, there is always loose material in the shaft, which may at least partly come from the shaft testing with the metal rods from Morton Edgar. It is clear from the Edgar letter that M. Edgar used metal rods of different thicknesses and tested the south shaft up to the blocking stone, which was unknown to him at the time. Due to the multiple bends of the north shaft and the resulting metal rods breaking several times, he could not get through to the blocking stone. This also explains why the metal pins in the northern shaft, both were still intact, while in the southern shaft, the left metal pin had broken off. This is also clear in the following letters to Hugo Carlin from January 21, 1947 and January 28, 1947. For my rod knocked distinctly against a solid ending, as though the channel came to an abrupt stop, a solid stone stop, against which my steel rod with its wood terminal knocked every time I pulled it back, and then suddenly thrust it upward again, which of course I did many times, to put this matter beyond all doubt. Edgar's statement about his work on the Royal Chamber shafts is also interesting. Here he first cleaned the air shafts, so that a clear draft could be felt in the King's Chamber, and then built protection against rain and dirt at the outer ends of the pyramid's exterior. He also reports a significant drop in temperature inside the pyramid, which would also be useful for the numerous tourists. When I had finished my work in connection with the air channels of the Queen's Chamber, I directed my attention to the channels of the King's Chamber in that same year, 1928. For although air came through the South Channel into the King's Chamber during my former visits, the North Channel had always been stopped with debris, so that air never passed through it. And now, during a heavy rainfall in 1925, much debris had been carried into the South Channel, blocking this up too. So I directed my workmen to clear out the debris from the South Channel, and this was done fairly easily, for the debris had not yet settled firmly in the small channel. But with the North Channel the work of clearing out the debris was very difficult. The debris had had time to settle, and had hardened almost solid. They poured a little water down the channel, to soften the debris, and then laboriously turned the long rod, with the use of levers, 6 men working at it, and managed each time to cut out a mere handful of the debris. But before they could get this handful, they had to draw out the long rod, and unscrew each section up to the very last part, till they got to the cutting tool, out of which they then could extract their handful of dust, and throw it away. Then they had to insert their rod again, screwing on each section to enable them to reach the debris a long distance down the channel, turn it a few times to scoop out another handful of the debris, and draw out the rod once more. This procedure had to be repeated over and over again, until at last they got through the debris. But it took these 6 men 6 weeks to do the job. Now a fine strong breeze blows through this North Channel, sometimes outward, and sometimes inward, according to the direction of the wind outside. As the result of these 2 channels being open, the temperature in the interior of the pyramid immediately decreased, making the inside of the building very much more comfortable to work in, and more comfortable for the numerous visitors too, for it used to be very hot in the pyramid. All that is changed now. To prevent rain from again carrying down debris into these 2 air channels, and so stopping them up again, I instructed my men to do some building work at their outer ends, arranging this little bit of masonry in such a way that debris could not be carried into the channels by rain. 10 years later, in 1938, I found that this masonry, which I had caused to be built at the exterior ends of the channels, was still performing its intended object, for both the channels were acting perfectly, entirely free of debris. A strong current of air blew through both channels, keeping the air in the chambers and passages fresh and pure, and cool. Sometimes, indeed, the temperature inside the building was rather cold. The Antiquities Department, while giving me the necessary permission to do this work, did not engage the men, nor pay them. The last time the North Air Canal was cleared of debris was away back in 1837, or about 90 years previously, when coal Howard Vyse had it cleared out. He writes that it took his men 6 weeks to do this job, the same time as mine took. But as Vyse did not do any masonry work at the outer ends of the channels, they were again stopped up with debris, carried in by the rain, which, by the by, sometimes falls heavily in the winter, though not for many days. As described here, the King's Chamber shafts were free due to M. Edgar's cleaning work from 1928 to at least 1938 and were used both to supply air inside the pyramid and to reduce the temperature inside the pyramid. Rudolf Gantenbrink, unaware of these events, claims on his website that he was the first after Howard Vyse to uncover the shafts again and thus ensure air circulation and a reduction in temperature and humidity. Since the time of Vyse, the pyramid was not restored until 1988, according to Hawass. He did not take M. Edgar's corresponding work in the 1920s into account, perhaps out of ignorance. The humidity inside the pyramid had increased to over 80% due to the large number of tourists, which could also be seen in the Great Gallery by a layer of salt that had now grown to over 1 centimeter thick. That is why Hawass closed the Great Pyramid in August 1988 until May 1989. As part of the restoration work at that time, it was also decided to install a ventilation system. The